very, very excited for this important and significant interview that I'm doing with Beauty Whitfield. She's a phenomenal individual, phenomenal woman. I'm just so happy she's with us today. There's a couple things that I kind of want to go over, some talking points, of course. We're going to go over, Beauty, your amazing book.
Thank you.
Latinos Who Boss Up 2.0 Secrets from Super Bosses, Making It Work in the Most Amazing Ways. And this book is amazing. I read not only your section, chapter 7, but I also looked through other Latinos stories and of empowerment. And this is presented by, published by Women with a Vision International, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
And so this book is on how do people get this book first off?
Yeah, so they can purchase it actually through my website, www.iambeautiousme.com, and they can go to shop and it'll be right there where they can purchase it. Just as a quick plug, if you do purchase it this month, I am donating half of the proceeds to a domestic violence shelter. Michele, I know you would appreciate to hear that.
Yes.
But I work closely, well, I'm colleagues with someone who oversees a program that is just amazing here in New York and Westchester County. And so I felt compelled that for Mother's Day, for the, Mental Health Awareness Month, and for May, just to donate half my proceeds to them.
That is a phenomenal contribution. Thank you so much for doing that. And thank you so much for writing your chapter 7 in this book. Chapter 7 is called Rewinding Back the Story. And your quote, I need to be out there to help others who are struggling, unquote. And I think that that's an amazing contribution as a mental health provider and as someone who's in business and a new author. So that's fantastic. So let me introduce you formally to the audience. You're relatively new in private practice clinician. Beauty is a business owner of Beauteous.
Beauteous.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's
Beauteous,
okay.
Beauteous Mind Mental Health Counseling. She's also a new author of a wonderful publication by Women with Vision International called Latinos Who Boss Up, of which we'll be diving in more today. Here's what the book looks like, everybody. And it looks like if you're a woman who bosses up or who wants to boss up, particularly in an Afro-Latino culture, this book is a must-have. So let's just dive right in.
Let's go in.
Let's go in. I'm interested in Beauty and how you became a part of this amazing kind of format, this book.
So someone had reached out to me via email and said, hey, we have this book, we have this collection of books, and we would love for you to be a part of it. And so what I did was I responded and I was like, well, tell me more, let me get more information. And then I started seeing that Deluxe Life Media has like a series of books. And actually one of the guests that I had on my podcast a while ago was actually part of one of their books a long time ago. So, it was a book just sharing stories about women and women's empowerment. And that's just been the collective of this organization. And so when the opportunity arose to share my story as a Latina, I jumped right in.
Yeah, I swear, I mean, what an amazing opportunity for you and to share your story. And I want to get into a little bit about what you shared in your story so our audience can kind of get a little bit of a snippet.
Yeah.
You talked about stigmas and mental health in your section. I'm interested in knowing, in terms of your perspective, how has the mental health stigma changed over the course of a period of time that you could see just over in general and for Black and Brown communities?
Yeah, so I'm seeing a shift, I think more so during the pandemic or after the pandemic, where more people are, especially celebrities, are coming out and saying, my mental health is important. My mental health is like, I can't do this because I'm anxious, etc. Back then, it wasn't seen because the Black and Brown community has been stigmatized for so many different things. And so in the Latino culture, when it comes to mental illness, it's very much brushed off. You pray on it, you don't stress it out. This is what you have to do. In the Black and Brown community, it's also very similar. Either you pray on it or it's very dismissed, whatever anxieties you have. And I think it's a level when we think about intergenerational trauma and what our ancestors have passed on, when we look at that scope of things, where it's like, well, we've been through the hardest of the hardest. We've been through slavery, or we've been through migration, etc. So what you're experiencing is not as hard as what we've experienced in the past. And so we're intergenerationally passing that from our wombs to our children, in kind of minimizing emotions and minimizing behaviors. And so when someone is feeling like this extremity, or someone goes off to the end, whether that is a significant amount of depression, or commits a crime, or decides to die by suicide, then people are alarmed and like, I should have known. They did say something, I didn't pay attention, I wasn't a part of it. And so now that we're shedding light and saying, no, this is not okay, we have to pay attention, just as you would treat a diabetes or high blood pressure that needs consistent routine medical care. It's the same thing with your mental health, because when it isn't taken care of, it does get worse.
Yes.
Sweeping it under the rug, then it manifests itself, and it comes out and shows up in other ways,
Oh
in
my
ways that
gosh.
are super dangerous. So whether that's impulsive behaviors or dangerous behaviors, or just anger, frustration. And so you find yourself in these loopholes and in these cycles, these endless cycles in your life, where you're either dating multiple people, or just a serial cheater, or you're
Mhm.
spending and overspending, or just living a different lifestyle, as far as like living off the grid, or whatever that is. It, it comes out, it shows up, and it comes out.
It really does. It really does. And I feel like right now we're in a culture and a society right now where mental health is really, really being examined and looked at, because if it's not as it was in the past, but behind closed doors back then,
Mhm.
it impedes your level of functioning
Yeah.
in so many ways. Like, for instance, if you don't take care of your good mental health, you're not going to be able to work. You're
No.
not going to be able to make money. You're not going to be able to survive. So, I mean, stuff like this, like, people don't understand. I think people have a hard time just wrapping their head around just how important, and it is now more so compared to the medical model. Like,
Mhm.
we go for routine checkups for our medical. Why aren't we doing that for our mental health? Like, I mean, it's the
Right.
same,
I say the same thing. It's like
right.
it's something that you have to pay attention. I will say something though. Yesterday I was in conversation with my other peer groups of private practice practitioners, and someone had brought up that now job applications are asking about mental health, which I have an issue with, because
Yes.
there's HIPAA. They're not asking you if you have high blood pressure. They're not asking you if you have high cholesterol. They're not asking you about your diabetes. So why would in a job application you ask about mental health? So are
Right.
we trying to destigmatize it and you're going off the end and forgetting about HIPAA and privacy laws?
Mhm.
Or are you going to use this to then not give someone an opportunity to be promoted, to be more punitive towards someone who suffers from lateness, etc.? So these are the
Right.
things that we have to kind of look at and think of, because they're impacting everyone. And for me to hear that it's coming up like in a job application, I'm
Oh
like,
my
what?
gosh. Wow. That's
Crazy.
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see why it would. But because of HIPAA, absolutely inappropriate. Inappropriate.
Inappropriate.
Yeah, yeah,
Inappropriate.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You did bring up generational trauma, and
Mhm.
I want to kind of bring that to the forefront.
Yeah.
The trauma that generations have carried on from ancestors, grandparents, and parents, and as you being a first generation, are all burdens and projected fears,
Yeah.
as well as generational traumas and vicious, repetitive dysfunctional cycles.
Yeah.
They're all prevalent in our generation, less than, but still prevalent. Per your childhood reflections that you've explained in your book, of which you had growing up, of not feeling as loved as you wanted to, or
Mhm.
like you didn't belong and people didn't understand you,
Mhm.
as well as some family members that have violated you
Mhm.
in a sexual way.
Mhm.
This equated to your own traumas,
Yeah.
as a woman in your generation. In your chapter 7, you reflected and wondered if you had somebody to support you, how would that have changed the course of your life, career, relationships? I'm just interested in knowing because I experience similar things in my life, and I can go by my recollection how that would change my scope of my life. I'm just wondering how it would change yours.
Yeah, so when I look back, being first generation, when something so traumatic happens to you, you feel isolated because you have to keep family secrets. And so
Mhm.
that loneliness and that feeling like you don't belong is that feeling of holding on to the secrecy, because how do you out your own family? How do you go ahead and tell the world or tell someone or tell a trusted quote unquote individual at the school that something happened at home and with a family member? That's detrimental. You're taught from the beginning that what stays in the house, what goes on in this house stays in this house, and family is family. And so you
Mhm.
look at these disturbing patterns, and then you pick up and you hold on until you kind of free yourself, or until you're doing the work, or until you're like in the field. And when I reflect back on my experience and thinking I wish I had someone like me, I thought about that question as I was reflecting, and preparing for today, and I became the person who I wanted in my life back then.
Mhm.
That's who I've become. The person
Yeah.
who I needed back then is the person who I've become now. The person who enjoys working with adult women who have suffered from trauma, with adolescents who have experienced trauma as well, and being a sounding board and being supportive and really diving in and letting them know that they have a safe space. That's who I became, because I could have had those people in my life, but there was no trust. I couldn't trust
Right.
anyone.
Right, absolutely, and similar with my my father exposing me to secondary trauma through his abuse and his trauma.
Yeah.
I think it would, if not having been exposed to that so early on, because I knew early on, as you did, wanting to get in the field early on in your life. I
Yeah.
think without that exposure of some sort, I wouldn't have taken the path career wise, relationship wise, that I had if I didn't have that exposure.
Yeah. It's the wounded healer.
Yeah,
The wounded
exactly.
healer. It just always just stands out. It is the wounded healer.
Yeah, yeah. So due to these adversities and childhood traumas that you've experienced, and you persevered to live your life on your own terms,
Hmm.
which is amazing. And it's very intentional. Your purpose-driven life is very intentional. You aim to currently in the best way to motivate other women,
Yeah.
particularly women of culture. How do you best motivate other women? What is your secret, particularly women of culture?
Finding that inner light. When
Okay.
you're in session with someone, they give you bits and pieces of themselves. So as a therapist, your job is to kind of put the puzzle pieces and come through that aha moment. So some of those aha moments can be ugly moments and identifying behaviors that people like struggle with, but it's finding that light and saying, you know what? This is something that I see of you. This is something that shines bright. This is something that brings you joy. This is an affect that changes when we're in session, and I'm paying attention to it, giving them that opportunity to see that there is light and that they are light at the end of the tunnel is what makes the difference, because one needs to be heard, one needs to be seen, and one needs to be validated that what your lived experience was in childhood, or even if it was an adult trauma, was actually true, and that you deserve to have a voice, you deserve to speak on it, but you also deserve to heal and not hold on to that pain. And when people are able to hear that, it's not like I share my story in sessions, unless, my clients are following my podcast or whatever,
Mhm.
then they get that glimpse. But it's to know that there is light at the end of the tunnel and there's a purpose. So despite the adversities that I faced in my childhood, I am here because it is a conscious choice that I've made to pay attention to my light. And it's not to say that every day is just peaches and cream, because sometimes you have moments, memories, glimpses. You could watch a TV show, you could watch Law and Order SVU and be like, oh, get triggered. Or there might be transference when it comes to a session and someone discloses something that seems very similar to what you've
Yes.
experienced. And so taking inventory of that, but knowing that you have the capacity to do the work and the tools and the resources that you've used, and even course correcting, as therapists always need therapists. And
Mhm.
that is something that I say, make sure you invest also in your mental health, because we're hearing stories, we're hearing things all the time. We have to continuously work on ourselves so that our baggage is not poured onto the people that we're working with.
I totally, totally agree. I always talk about like having somebody, a therapist in my back pocket to pull
Yeah.
out whenever I need to. And and I have had to use it. And even just with, if you're gonna talk the talk, the therapist has got to walk the walk. Like,
Exactly.
you know, I,
Exactly. I can't promote mental health if I'm not taking care of mine.
exactly, exactly, exactly. And not just your mental health, but also your physical health, like
Yeah.
taking care of yourself. I have like a health coach through
Yeah.
my insurance,
Yeah.
to my insurance company that I utilize, and she keeps me accountable. And it's little things like that that keep you accountable and keep
Yes.
your I'm always tweaking my self-care skills, always,
Yes.
whether it be book, whether it be exercise regime, whether it be diet, whether it be trying to, for me, it's learning how to stay as moderate as I possibly can
Yeah.
with different things in my life, whether it be drink, food, just in life. Those are the things that I'm working on in terms of my mental health and things that I need to work on within myself.
Yeah.
And I think as a therapist, I mean, yes, I think it's very important that you exercise the mode of talking the talk, but
Yeah.
also walking the walk.
Yeah. Yes,
So
absolutely. It is so important. And like you said, we always have to tweak and mold. We always
yeah,
have to look at practice what you preach is basically the best way to kind of sum it. Practice what you
exactly.
preach.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, I assume based on what you talked about in your chapter, that education was not an option,
Hmm.
and that you fell in love with the social work courses in college,
Yeah.
and you attain a respected mentor and professor who you're able to relate to as an Afro-Latino professional role model.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about tell me a little bit about her. Tell me a little bit about that relationship.
Yeah. And so it was my sophomore year in class, and I walked into this class. It was like I don't even remember the course. I don't think it was social work 101. It might have been like social work 101. It was like very introductory to what the social work field was. I took it as an elective because my major was psychology. So I took this course, and I see this woman walk in, pencil skirt, pointy heels. I was like, she is just fabulous. She just had this pizzazz in her. And as she's going through and teaching us about the social work field and exposing us to so many different things and looking at it, I looked at psychology, and it's not offending anyone in psychology. And I was like, I didn't feel that passion. I didn't feel like that shine and that light that just motivated me. And so she was like a force to be reckoned with. And I've always looked up to her. I've always admired her. I've lost contact with her. I've tried to like reach out to other people and be like, hey, have you heard of Dr. Hernandez? Have you heard of this? Like, I'm hoping she's okay. I've looked through Facebook to try to see if I find her. Maybe now that everyone's on social media, I'm going to try again. But she showed me that, number one, you can be a college professor as an Afro Latina. You can have a doctorate. It's like she just showed me just a different light, where growing up in Washington Heights, in the hood, where a lot of friends or even girls, it was just, you saw college, but you didn't see above. I didn't see masters until someone pushed me to get my master's. Like, you couldn't see above because you felt like I had to do this to kind of finalize, to break these barriers and this financial gap so I could
Mhm.
move here. But you couldn't see it like higher than that. And she gave me the opportunity to seek higher and want more for myself, and to know that I too can be represented in that light. And I just, to this day, I'm like her biggest fan, even though I'm not in contact with her.
I agree. I think it's important in this field, particularly in just in education, to have a mentor. Like
Yeah.
I have one too, also lost contact with her as well, but I'm able to regain contact with her. I haven't heard from her in a little bit. We periodically go out to dinner together
Yeah.
every once in a while just to catch up. But honestly, like I think in the field, it's very important to have somebody that you look up to. And it sounds like not only did she replicate kind of like uh, uh, breaking down those barriers for Latino women and being a doctor, being a professor, but she also had this own kind of like vibe and style to
She
her.
did. And let me tell you something, pencil skirts and pointy heels are my thing. They are my true staple outfit.
Very, very New York.
Very.
I love it.
Very, very much Sex in the City looking, definitely. Definitely.
So you knew early on, at a young age, that we talked about before, that you wanted to get into the field. What was the precipitating factor that made you realize that at a young age?
I think it was, you shift. I wanted to be a teacher. And then, back then I didn't know. And I was like, I want to be a secretary. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be this. And it wasn't until I got to college and you had to write kind of an essay to really reflect and talk about yourself, where I was like, ooh, there were some things that
Mhm.
I've buried and I haven't talked about. And so I knew at that point that I wanted to help and that I wanted to support, that I wanted to be a voice for someone who was experiencing just adversities. And so that's where it kind of came in that,
Gotcha.
like that 17, 18-year-old time frame.
Okay. Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. We talked, well, skipping around a little bit.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about family secrecy, and I want to definitely talk about cultural gender roles,
Yeah.
which I can identify with in my culture, being an Italian, American Italian. In your culture and cultures of Latinas and African American cultures, family secrecy is common.
Very.
And particularly when it comes to sexual trespasses or assaults in the family dynamic, as this is really just not, like you mentioned before, not talked about, and outsiders are to stay out of the family's business. That secrecy, and this type of secrecy and silencing is at its finest.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah. I absolutely agree.
In your culture and in my culture, as being Italian, third generation descent, it was expected to be for women in the family to be submissive and to be taught at an early age to bear children and to take care of the family and the home.
Yes.
As the only girl in your family dynamic, it's so similar stories here, and the youngest in your family, how did you not conform to those cultural expectations?
I tell you, I was born with pizzazz. My late aunt, she had passed away a year ago. A lot of people compare us to each other because she had a hefty, like she was no game, like very much like everyone's like, you are just like your aunt. I mean, I didn't know it at that time until now, you get into adulthood and you realize that you guys have similar personalities. But I just knew it was wrong, that there was like these gender differences, that my brothers could do this, but I couldn't do this. And my brothers could do, and being the only girl, I was alone all the time because the boys were doing things together. And so I fought a lot of things throughout the way. In my chapter, I described my uncle who had migrated from the Dominican Republic, and his whole family lived with us. And that was an adjustment because I had to give up my space, assimilate a little bit to his cultural expectations. And I was taken aback when he beat my cousin for not washing the dishes. It was just this expectation that it's like, you're not worthy of anything. You need to clean, cook, pick up after me and the men in the house and the brothers. And that was hard for me because my parents didn't push that agenda. And I was afraid when my uncle was there that my dad was going to pick up on it, because like you do see kind of shifts in people, like when your older brother's there and you want to kind of prove that you're the man of the house, so that you have like leadership of your home. And I was really afraid, and my uncle was trying a lot to control that narrative in the house. you need to do this. Like, I remember one time he was saying that I needed to do my brother's laundry. I was like, I'm not washing their clothes. Like, they can wash their own clothes. I'm not washing anyone's clothes. You know, the most that this house is going to get is I'll clean my parents' room, my room, and the rest of the house, but I'm not cleaning my brother's room at all. But it was this expectation. It was very much like, you cook, you clean, you serve, you bring the slippers. And I couldn't. I just, when you have this innate personality, I just couldn't. It was not in me. However, you still picked up some of it. I still see myself as a parent. I serve my son and my husband first before I serve myself. So, but I also do that when I have guests. I make sure that everyone eats before myself. So it's like, it's you've been taught to put everyone else before yourself. And as a woman, that's what's really taught.
Right. And you talked about previously, just in this question, discriminations of what your brother were able to do versus what you were allowed to do. Give me some examples, because I can really,
oh my goodness,
can I relate to this? As
hanging out with friends, going to like great adventures, bringing girls over. The list could go on, where it was just like, so they have all these privileges and I don't. I remember my brother had brought a girl over to sleep over, and I had told my mom, I was like, oh, so you let him do this, so when I get to the age, I'm gonna do the same as well. And she's like, she's like, no. But interesting enough, my brother's daughter, my niece, she has my same personality. And I think my nephew tried that, and she was like, oh, so then I'm bringing my boyfriend home. I was like, oh my God, I passed this on to someone else. It's that female empowerment. Like, we're not gonna deal with it.
My brother's daughter, they call her mini me.
Yeah.
Because she's a little bit of a spitfire.
Yeah.
And she's like the younger female version of me.
Yeah.
And to its finest. I think she's like 3 times as worse though, in terms of like determination. Like, this is what it is. This is how it goes. It's so interesting to watch my brother and my sister-in-law kind of manifest and deal with that type of person. I'm like,
and meanwhile, you're like, I know how to manage it. This is what you need to tell her. This is what you have to do.
It's funny because I was always growing up in my household, the free spirit of the family, if you will, and so it's just interesting to watch her become like this butterfly, this like unfolding of a beautiful personality. And she has that kind of like pizzazz that you talked about. And it's just so interesting to see my brother get a little nervous.
Yeah. My brother calls my niece sometimes my name, which is interesting. So I laugh at them now. I'm like, I'm so glad God gave you daughters, because you guys criticized me and always said, oh, you're daddy's favorite, you're daddy's little girl. I'm like, now I see your daughters have you guys manipulated. Like, they get anything from their dad. So I laugh at them all the time. I'm like, good for you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. So you transformed, and you were very determined to break these cultural expectations and barriers, which was an at-home Latino who should have conceived and be domesticated at home. Instead, you did not let anyone or anything get in front of your dreams. No. So I think that is like so inspirational and amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I was determined. Even, my senior year in college, I came out pregnant with my son, and I didn't let that stop me from anything. I was like, I gotta go get my master's degree. I gotta work. I gotta do this. Like, I went into full mommy independent woman mode.
So I'm interested, you bring up your son. It's your son, right?
Yeah.
So I'm interested in knowing how your son kind of continued to launch you forward in determination.
I knew that I needed to show him differently of our culture, that you cannot have these expectations that women had to do everything, that you needed to be independent. So I'm grateful that I didn't raise him in a household where he has this expectation, because I don't want him ever showing up in a dating relationship to be like, serve me my plate. Where's my this? Wash my clothes. Serve for me? Never. And so breaking that pattern of our generation was very important to me.
Good, good. How was he the motivating, when with him being born, you being in college?
So interesting enough, I was motivating because I didn't want to be that statistic, even though I was that statistic.
Gotcha.
I was the
Gotcha.
Latina single mom at a young age, at 21, and I did not want to be that statistic at home or in a shelter or, you know, receiving food stamps, etc. I did not want that. I didn't want to be stuck living in my parents' house either, raising my child. And it's not criticizing anyone, but I just wanted to break all of that stigma and things that I've seen from before. Just women end up having kids out of wedlock and then living with their parents all the time. I was just so determined to break that, making sure I got my own apartment, making sure that, you know, I made the sacrifices that I made to show my son something different. That's been the driving force, is always to strive higher, to break different financial brackets so that I can show my son that there's something else, because I knew what it was for my parents to work long hours, and I'm grateful for everything that they've sacrificed for us, you know, immigrating into this country. But I wanted to show him something different.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So in 2019, you started your own podcasting coaching practice.
Yeah.
Your podcast is called Beauteous.
Beauteous Me. Yeah.
Beauteous Me podcast, and it's on Apple. Where else is it located on?
It's on Apple, Spotify, Libsyn, Google Play, wherever you listen to your podcast.
Gotcha. And I was on your podcast, so I really
yes, you were. That's how we've connected.
That's how we connected. This podcast, is just so our audience knows, are episodes and testimonials of inspirational stories and guidance of countless women through the journey of discovering their inner beauty, despite the adverse experiences they've encountered in their lives. You host these candid conversations, in which I really appreciated my own episode of universal issues of women face on a weekly basis. So I think that's a fantastic and amazing, just to have that kind of educational outlet. So let me just say this: if you are searching for an everyday inspiration, and this is to my audience, in the midst of self-discovery, and you want to hear great conversations and advice, I advise you to check out IamBeauteousMe.com under the tab that says podcast, and this is your website, correct? Can you spell out your website for our audience?
Of course. IamBeauteous. I am Beauteous Me.
And
.com.
.com.
Yeah.
You also have professional coaching.
Yes.
So you customize. I'm going to tell the audience a little bit about your professional coaching. You customize, individualized, not cookie cutter, one-on-one programs for people collaborating, working together to target the problem areas in the person's life, with a pointed focus on emotional grit and resilience, which I absolutely love. In doing so, your collaborative goal of your coaching work is to build confidence, reduce stress and anxiety surrounding the needs to please, creating a freedom of self-inflicted pressures. Your work on individuals' needs helps to set boundaries. You learn communication skills and styles, mindset shifts, behavioral shifts, and learning to listen to your intuition and inner guides. Tell me how your coaching came about.
Yeah, so I think
and your podcast.
So I was talking about doing a podcast for such a long time, and I hit like a brick wall, and I was just feeling like I know there's more to me, and I know I want to do something. So I was going through like a really bad time, and my husband is like, "What do you want to do?" I was like, "I want this podcast. I think I want to do this podcast." He was like, "If you want this podcast, then do the podcast." I was like, fine. So he got me the equipment. He was very supportive. He purchased the equipment for me. I started doing research. Well, how do I do a podcast, and how do I do this? And of course you start learning, and you have bumps in the road. But I really wanted a space to have conversation and share stories of resiliency where people can see that there is light at the end of the tunnel, no matter what you've experienced. I wanted professionals, I wanted people with lived experience to come in and say, hey, these are tools and techniques. If you're experiencing this, if you're going through DV, for professionals or whatever, this is what we can do to support. If you're going through anxiety, anger, depression, or if you want to bring spirituality to it, because it's important for people to see things from a different stance. I've had people host and talk about, mindful eating, but eating more of like a practice through God, to other people talking about the Enneagram and spirituality based and block chakras and all of that. Just so it speaks to everyone. It's not just the one sounded voice. It speaks to everyone to see, wow, this story resonated with me. This is how they were able to heal this connects with me. This is how I want to heal. And that's what I want. I built this catalog. It's like your endless toolbox where you can go and choose whatever episode you want to listen to, where you feel you can connect more to do some of that inner work. So that was the premise of the Beauteous podcast.
That's awesome, because I know, like, in tweaking my own self-care regime, I look for that in podcasts, like an episode that can help me be a little bit more innovative in my own life and apply it to my own life. So it's such a good resource for women and just for people in general to kind of tap into, so they can educate themselves.
Right. And what I love the most is that I'm also a listener. And that despite me being the podcast host, I'm also a listener, and I'm always taking notes like, oh, wow, that was great. Oh, wow, this was great. You're always going to be a student. And I want people to understand that you're forever going to be a student. So that's where the podcast was born.
And tell me a little bit about how the coaching.
Yeah. So the coaching piece, I was like, well, I want to coach people. And I knew I was getting into private practice at that time. But I wanted to coach. And it's like, how do you coach and how do you mentor and how do you speak to people? And I wanted to develop a program using my experiences as a therapist that has worked through evidence-based practices on tools that can really help people in the short term, right? Because coaching is this is the one problem that you have. This is a solution that you need to come up with. Here are all the tools encompassed with one person there supporting you and saying, you got this, you got this, you got this, you got this. Therapy is deeper. Therapy is for you to get to the root of the drama, the root of what's causing some of these behaviors. So they're always different. Therapy is really focused on the clinical point and really digging all the way back. Coaching is focusing on, this is a problem that consistently happens to you. Let's break these barriers and let's move forward. And so I wanted to use my skills in order to support people in two different platforms, because as we talk about destigmatizing mental health, people will prefer to hire a coach sometimes before they admit that they want to go in and to see a therapist.
That's true. Yeah. That's very true. That's very true. So you have a license to practice in the state of New York.
Yes.
So all my New Yorkers out there who want to seek counseling, specifically counseling, coaching, you want to head over to Beauty's website. In 2022, it was in 2022, you started your own clinical
December,
practice.
Just recently.
Just recently. So if you are in New York and you want professional counseling, this is your woman. Reach out to Budy Whitfield. Tell us a little bit more about your private practice that you just started.
Of course. So when the pandemic hit, I started doing telehealth. So I was doing telehealth through different platforms to support people. And I was like, I like this. I like doing telehealth and I like supporting people. It was so rejuvenating for me. And so as I was thinking more and more about it, as I was working, for other telehealth platforms and other practices, I said, I think it's time for me to branch off and do this on my own. I would have never, Michele, thought that I would have been in private practice. I am telling you 500%. My goal was to be a VP, a CEO for an organization. I would have never thought that I would have fallen in love with this. I would be like, private practice, that's not for me. But I fell in love with it. I fell in love with working with adult women and working and healing with them, and even with adolescents, late adolescents, not younger adolescents. And so, you know, it took months for the paperwork to go through in New York State, but it was official. My PLLC was official in December. And so the practice has been growing little by little, and it's just an excitement. And I'm like, I like being in this world. What have I been missing this whole time? So I treat women, millennial women, Gen Z women who experience anxiety, depression, life stressors, divorce, grief, sexual assault, sexual trauma. I'm also certified in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, which is an approach for children who have experienced complicated grief or any sort of trauma. And so, you know, that's my specialty. And
Wow.
I just find myself excited all the time to learn more and take courses and, you know, expand my CEUs because I
The
love it.
best.
Yes.
Always a student. Once a student, always a
Always
student.
a student. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what, just out of curiosity, because I know for me, like I've been in private practice for about 12 years now.
Yeah.
I know what was my scariest moment for me. What was your scariest thing launching your own business as a new entrepreneur during COVID-19?
There's so many therapists, you know, the mindset. There's so many other
Mhm.
therapists. People might think I'm inexperienced because I have more experience working in, you know, a non-for-profit. How do I manage a business? How do I do this? What are the ins and outs? Like just
Because
policies, laws.
yeah, because in school,
You're not
when I
taught
went,
this.
you're not taught to go into business for yourself,
No, not at all.
which is
Not at
such a
all.
which is such a disadvantage when you have these, you're going for your license and you're going to,
Exactly.
I mean, just such a something that should be a core course on how to have, they talk about, they have community mental health classes and community
Right.
mental health, why not have a schooling on how to be your own entrepreneur in your own business?
Exactly. And so I hired a coach last year, January, who works with clinicians who want to go into private practice and how to like grow their business, et cetera. And that's been helpful, you know, all the courses that I've been taking and learning how to run a private practice, you know, insurance and paying taxes,
I know
all these
about that.
adult
Yes.
things, you know.
Yes,
A
definitely.
PLLC versus an LLC, you know, like so many different things, you know, and ultimately
Right.
I landed with the PLLC to keep both businesses completely separate. What's clinical is clinical, what's non-clinical is non-clinical.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Gotcha. Awesome. It is definitely a learning curve, isn't it?
it sure is.
I'm not
It's a
gonna
learn
lie.
and it's nerve-wracking. You know, I remember a few weeks ago as I was like getting ready to pay my quarterly taxes, I was like in a mood. And I was like, what's wrong with you? I was like, I don't know how to calculate these taxes and how am I supposed to pay them? What if I get arrested? You know, like you start, you know, catastrophizing all these different things because you're like, these taxes are just, how
I
do you do it?
know.
He's a business owner. I'm like, how do you manage this? This is a lot.
Yeah, it is. It is. That's so funny. So in terms of, I did have one clinical question
Yeah.
for you, because I think it's interesting for me to talk to other therapists that may run into this. What happens when you're met with a client who's resistant, when you try to dig a little deeper into their story? What do you do as a therapist when you are met with that resistance?
Interesting. So I did have a client who's no longer in therapy. And it was that she felt it was just too much to dig in and felt that her resiliency um, has helped her leap forward academically, like very smart academically, is now pursuing a doctorate degree. And so she wanted to keep that resiliency that has kept her so focused in academia and receiving all these scholarships, because the pain of talking about the trauma that she's experienced, she didn't know what that was going to happen with that. And so we
Yeah.
had an honest conversation. And I said, if you're not ready to open up and talk about this, that's perfectly okay, because I'm not going to push you. I understand that right now you're going for your doctorates and it's like a long program, but I will tell you that this might impact this, it might impact this, it might impact this, it might impact this. You know, it's everything is a choice. So if right now this is how you feel, it's okay. You know, and I
Yeah.
think we have to have honest conversations when we see that resistance in sessions where it's just saying, are you ready to move forward, or is this too painful? Also, what are you afraid of?
Mhm.
Because some people might have had a bad moment where they've hit like a dark space in their life. and they've hit rock bottom, and they're afraid that if they talk about that very thing, that they're going to go back to that rock bottom. Because for some
Right.
people, it's taken them a long time to get just to where they are, whether it's at this level or at this level, whatever level that is. There's this channel and this journey that you've had to encounter in order to get here. So I think it's also respecting and acknowledging how to peel the onions while
Mhm.
dipping the onions in water so that you're not crying. It's
Yeah.
really having soft conversations and possibly bringing it up here and bringing it up there, but not in a detrimental way, because like I said, as therapists, unless we're doing our own work, we can ruin someone. We can truly like bring in our own thing. And imagine if I would have taken it and I would have been like, well, you experienced this trauma in your childhood, so this is exactly why you're this way, and this is exactly why you're single, or you would ruin someone if you said something like that. You would
Exactly.
completely traumatize someone. It's acknowledging where they were, that pain-based behavior, and understanding that I respect where you are in your journey, and I see that it's helped you get this far in life, which is phenomenal. It's amazing that you've had these opportunities. However, when you don't take the time to address it, this is what it's going to impact. So you have to allow them to make the choice.
Exactly. I'm a firm believer that allowing meeting the client where they're at.
Yeah.
And obviously as therapists, we try not to have our own biases, but we're
Right.
human beings. So
Right.
not pushing. I feel like therapists that push clients too much, too fast, too soon,
Right.
is a detriment to the client's mental health.
It's completely detrimental.
Yes.
And I had a client who had a significant trauma history, diagnosed with major depressive disorder. And whenever we tried to talk about the traumas, would regress. So we left it as her chatting session. And sometimes in our chatting sessions, I'd be like, we're kind of avoiding talking about that thing that you really want to talk about.
Mhm.
And at least, she recognized it. She understood that, yeah, this is, she's like, yeah, it's just too hard to get into. And that was
Yeah.
okay. So we addressed the depressive symptoms. We addressed through CBT how we can manage that thought, the thinking, the behaviors, catastrophizing, the cognitive distortions, to focus on that because the
Mhm.
depression was impacting her. And then whenever she was ready, then to address the trauma. But it's having
Exactly.
honest conversations and saying, at
Yes.
some point, you're going to have to talk about the trauma.
Right.
Because this is what's impacting this.
Right. And if we don't address it sometime, somehow, some way, it will come up and
It
resurface.
spills over.
Yeah,
It
totally
spills.
does. So I'm interested in you telling me and the audience just 3 objectives, 3 descriptive words as what it means to you to be a woman who bosses up.
Ooh. First of all, I think the first objective is identifying what boss up means. Forget about social media, forget about what you see people doing and like Oprah Winfrey or whatever, not disrespecting anyone, but your level of achievement is your level of achievement, and acknowledging and celebrating that. So if 2 years ago you had the worst panic attacks and worst anxiety, and 2 years later you don't have them, celebrate that you have bossed up. If a few years ago you were not able to finish a class, finish a course because you have neurodivergent or you have ADHD or whatever, and you've been able to finish a book or finish something, you've bossed up. If you've been able to move your tax bracket or advocate for yourself at a job you've been through for so many years, and you've just yes, man, yes, man, yes, man, and you finally put your foot forward, even if you've been knocked down, you've bossed up. So it's the ability to change what was impacting you before, and moving it up a level is you bossing up.
Wow. I absolutely love it.
Thank you.
So, and your own 3 objectives and adjectives, name 3 words. Let's see. I know this is super hard.
Yeah.
I hate these type of questions too. So
it's okay. I say resiliency, adversity, and fun.
Oh, very good.
Have fun with it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. Resiliency is, again, digging into understanding that you've experienced something and you've had to face whatever, but you've been able to pull from your strengths. adversity is to be able to see things differently despite what you've experienced.
Exactly. Oh my God, this is so good. I absolutely love this. So tell us, Budy, the ways in which the audience can reach you.
Yeah.
Website, Instagram, LinkedIn, talk to us. They'll all be on our note on the web on the notes for the video.
Yep.
But I need you to
Absolutely.
tell me where we're at.
Yeah, so my website is www.iambeauteousme.com. iambeautiousme.com. My Instagram is at iambeautiousme, same spelling. And my LinkedIn is Budy Whitfield, Budy Whitfield, Whitfield. You can also send me an email either at my therapy practice, which is bwhitfieldtherapy@gmail.com, or info@iambeauteousme.com. And I'm more than happy to just chat with anyone. And get the book. The book.
Yeah, the book.
Shop. Guys,
The
don't
book.
forget that we are donating half of the proceeds to this shelter in Westchester County, New York.
That's awesome. I am
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you,
so much.
Michele.